Hello there, very good morning and welcome to this morning's edition of Recount Watch. I'm your host, Eddy Layne, and I'm joined here this morning by Sanjeev Datadin. Sanjeev is a candidate of the People's Progressive Party Civic in the March 2nd general and regional elections. Sanjeev, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Ed. My pleasure to be here. Good morning to your listeners and viewers.
Sanjeev, today is the 30th day of the recount exercise. We know that just one box was remaining for Region 6 and one for Region 10, which we expect would have been completed sometime this morning. And all the stations are expected to be committed to Region 4, where there's about 300 plus boxes to be completed. But one of the issues remain the fact that a lot of objections are being made without any evidence to support them. We have seen the letter that was sent to the Commissioner of Police by the chair of GCOM requesting travel information on 207 persons. That list was returned to the chair by the Commissioner of Police with 172 names, if I have the figure correct. However, ever since that list was made public with the information from the Commissioner of Police, a number of persons continue to come forward to dispute the information contained in that list. We see the Kaitru News, I think, have another 7 persons today who are disputing that. Some of them are even moving to have affidavits to support their claim that they were in the country on elections day and they voted for themselves. This is a significant development, and it puts to question the accuracy of the information that is received from the Commissioner of Police.
Yes, Ed, it's 30 days. We are 30 days in. 30 hard days of work have gone in. As frustrating as that has been at times and as difficult as these 30 days are, it's important that we recognize that we are perhaps now closer to the end. We could see light at the end of the tunnel. We probably have 2-3 days more of recounts going on, and we will be free of this, and we will know what the will of the Guyanese people were. And as you could see, the PPP are overwhelmingly in the lead, and they will remain that way with what we go through. But coming back to what you raised about what the chairwoman of GCOM did, I know of no legal authority that she would have had to do that. GCOM is a creature of statute. As a creature of statute, it is important that we understand that whatever powers you exercise or what powers are given to you by the statute that creates you, there is no authority that I know of that permitted her to take it upon herself to investigate. She had earlier said, "He who asserts must prove," which means that if you were coming to her saying that this had not happened, then you should bring the evidence of it. I don't understand why it was GCOM is soliciting the evidence to justify what APNU's complaints are. So that's the first difficulty. The second difficulty is I do know that there is no lawful authority for the Guyana Police Force to give to a public body or any other agency the information as it relates to our citizens, to private persons. They keep that record as a public record. The public record doesn't mean that anybody in the public can access it. It means that it belongs to them. And we have passed legislation. Access to Information Act makes it very clear. If you wish a public record, you write to request it, and you write the Commission of Information, and then you go to court and you can get a court order for that information. You must show cause. But when you go for that court order, all the people affected have to be informed. That's the law. They will have to be informed that your public information is required for some reason. But you see, the legislation was specifically designed for that. So now in this situation, instead of we had the police release 172 names not being in the country, each one of those people would have had to be contacted, and they will say, well, look, we were here. So the police's the information that the police would have supplied would have been more accurate. There are mechanisms for accuracy. We can't take shortcuts. We're still a civilized society. We're barely holding on, but we're there. So we must function within the rules which exist. Now, what would have happened is those people would have been notified. And upon notification, they will confirm we were here, we were not here. And then the result that you had would have been accurate. We see every day in the newspapers, social media, we see from our own PPP website and Facebook page that there are so many people who are coming forward and saying that we were on that list, but we don't understand why we were. We were here in Guyana. So it obviously puts the credibility of this border system, border tracking system that the Commissioner of Police speaks of, that it puts it into question and it can't be relied upon. Now, it is absolutely clear that we realize as a nation, GCOM cannot investigate. GCOM can investigate its own records, as it did with Mingo, what is internal to it. GCOM cannot ask an external agency to verify their own records. That is the power for the court. So GCOM should not be engaging upon this. The Commissioner of Police should obey the law and not provide this information. I mean, I'm a lawyer 20 odd years. I've never written the Commissioner of Police for anything and gotten a response in 4 days. For anything. Not even an acknowledgement letter is received in 4 days. This is, I'm not complaining, this is good. Maybe we are improving. Maybe the Commissioner of Police, and when we write the police for information now, it will be forthcoming. But we need to understand that that does not change what has happened with the count. Now, even if we were to, for argument's sake, Ed, say that, look, Mr. Harmon had a list of 200 odd names, 172. He then supplied a second list of 264 names. We don't know if that has been sent to the police and the Commissioner of Information in Immigration, and we don't know if there will be a response. But let us take those and total them all up. That's 464 or thereabout names. The PPP are in the lead by 13,000. And even if you want to say double it, it still does not change the end result. We have been hearing, you're seeing now all over social media, you're seeing clips being played of the way these objections are being made. You hear the APNU rep stand up, or you could hear his voice saying that based on information we have on the ground, I don't know where on the ground they pick this information from. I understand SOPs also fly in the air and votes fly as well. But it beggars belief. But they say based of information they have on the ground, I don't know where they mean, these persons with these serial numbers did not vote could not vote because they migrated. And you hear them call number after number after number. And then you hear them saying, can we be told if these persons vote? And you hear the supervisor check the pink list and say, well, in some of the cases I've been listening to, the supervisors, no one that you have identified has voted. And they asked to add more names, to call out more names. And in some cases, the supervisor says, well, only 4 people were there. I mean, we are hearing these ridiculous situations where they're making objections based on information they have, based on information from their people on the ground, based on but they present no proof of these things. So, which means, Ed, you could walk in there and say, listen, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you could call all of them and say, based on my information, none of these people are here, and you can't accept none of their votes. We're seeing that there are issues of human mistake and error. They made a lot of issues recently in the last day. The APNU Facebook people and the APNU has been saying that in Sophia there was a school where 63 ballots that voted for APNU were rejected because they weren't properly stamped. But we've seen a full explanation of that given today in Kaichor News, where they said The returning officer said, you know what, the poll officer, the presiding officer said that there was a rookie person, perhaps an inexperienced, and if you look at the ballots, there are 2 stamps on the side with the regional ballot, and there are none on the side with the general ballot. Now that is unfortunate that the person who was there stamped it in a way, but there's nothing sinister about that. Human error, human mistake. What can we do about that? So there is nothing sinister as they would like us to believe. All right, these objections that keep coming are all invented objections. They are fantasy. Your mic is muted.
Yeah, I want to take you back to I wanted to go back to 2 of the points that you raised earlier. Before we get there, let me just share this information with you, which was brought to my attention, and by virtue of doing that, to inform the public. So at Plendola Nursery School, Ogle East Coast, Demerara, Division 414112C, the I, ballot box number 4583. 108 ballots were rejected for want of the official mark, meaning the 6-digit stamp is missing. 102 of those ballots are for the PPPC. APNU protested 61 rejected ballots at Sophia. You just mentioned that.
Yes.
But they're not protesting now, where, you know, it's on the other side. And I'll go to figure again for the yes. emphasis and to have you come in. So the box that I mentioned, you had 108 ballots rejected. 102 of those were for the PPP. And this yes. is the same thing like they claimed in Sophia, want of official mark. But there is yes. no proof now. So the clearly you can see the APNU AFC is clutching at straws.
They are, Ed. You have to understand, right? Let us be honest with each other. GCOM relies on their personnel to do the job that they have in front of them, and mistakes are sometimes made. Now, we all know that the paper is supposed to be folded a particular way, stamped one side, stamped the other side, and that's how you had both ballots. But if they weren't being folded correctly, you would have 2 stamps on one side of the ballot only. And the other ballots are, unfortunately, our law is if you don't have the mark, then it has to be rejected. Now, look at that. 63 was rejected for APNU, 102 are rejected in Ogle. But this is what happens with human error. We have to understand, when you put that into the comparison of 420,000 people or thereabouts voting, and you have a problem with 200 or 100 votes, what would you expect? Statistically, that is a perfect system. The errors that you speak of are human errors. There is no malice. There's no reason that we can impute malice to these things. Maybe if we have proof that it was done deliberately, all of that, then of course the position changes. But there is no evidence of these things at this point. And it's unfortunate that so much energy and so much negativity is being brought to bear by APNU's reps to try to discredit. But you see, it's more sinister than that. It's to try to incite people to believe that they are being robbed, and they will react. When they react, you will react as if you're being robbed. Leadership has burdens, and their leaders should stop using the average rank and file APNU supporter for their own benefits. They want to go back to enjoy the sweet of government. They are there now spending billions of dollars still. This is after the election. Billions of dollars is being spent on Ocean View. Billions of dollars are being spent supposedly to look after the COVID-19 virus. But that's what they want to do, to enjoy the sweet. So it's using their support and shielding behind their supporters, by deceiving their supporters. That's what's going on.
But by her own admission yesterday, if I can take you back to Valda Lawrence, when she spoke about a similar situation in Linden, her in Region 10, her issue was she recognized that it was a human error where the ballots were folded incorrectly. That is why you had one half stamped and the other half not stamped. But and she was lobbying for those votes to be given to the APNU because they were in the favor of APNU. The same thing obtained in Sophia with the 6-1 ballots that you were speaking of. However,
Correct.
when the shoe is on the other foot, there is a change of the tone and the argument. But I want to bring you back, Sanjeev, to the issue of the flawed list or the inaccurate information from the Commissioner of Police. We have to recognize the fact that by virtue of providing that information, which is inaccurate, the Commissioner of Police is somehow implicating citizens to somehow give the impression they were involved in some sort of electoral fraud if they weren't here and they voted. Do you see this as a basis maybe for actions to be taken, legal actions to be taken, whether against GCOM or the police?
Well, look at it this way. Our comrade, Hugh Todd, likes to say he has a phrase he likes. He says this phrase about the cow going to the slaughterhouse and what happens and the desperation that results. Ed, that's what's happening. We every day, you as one of the people who are charged with responding to what goes on, every day you're faced with more and more outrageous and more ridiculous claims by APNU. And what it is they know what the results were from the day after the election. They had the SOPs. They've still not published them. They still wouldn't disclose them. But they knew what the results were and what they have put Guyana through and forced our nation to endure. This punishment that they have visited upon us is because they are trying to find a way to hang on to power. They realize that they have lost. They first co-opted Mingo to give fraudulent numbers that are so clear to the whole world that they don't even want to talk about it. Every time you bring it up, they say, well, that's not the issue anymore. And we're past that. We're not past that. He committed a criminal offense and he must answer for that. So that's not over with yet. The next thing about it is, then we hear all the objections about how much migrants and dead. Remember, they were big in the first few days. This person is dead, this is dead, this is dead. You notice all the dead talk is gone. They're not making complaints about dead people voting anymore. It is now focused on migration. And it is my belief, and there is good reason for that belief, that they have accessed public records and they are receiving assistance from public departments about people who travel and travel records. And they're trying to put them together and make complaints. But they're not able to do it because it is really not, there is no chicanery, there is no jiggery pokery, there is no skullduggery in what transpired on election day. And they're trying to invent in the hope that something sticks. So what they're doing is throwing everything they can, including the kitchen sink, at the issue and hope something sticks, and whatever sticks, they go follow through on, and they try to make it an issue. But they have no way of overcoming, at present, 13,000 votes. How are they going to overcome the sheer will of the people? They're only doing it, Ed, by inventing things. They have turned on the people of Guyana. They have turned on their own supporters, alleging that their party scrutineers who go there to represent the party turned on them and colluded with the PPP. They said the OAS colluded with the PPP. They said the British High Commissioner, the American ambassador, they said the Commonwealth Observer Mission colluded. They said the Carter Center colluded. They said the US Secretary of State colluded. They said the messages that came from India, the messages that came from other democracies, that have clearly indicated what we are. We have managed, and if this is true, we're quite spectacular to have gotten all of these people to say that what they're doing is wrong without them having done anything wrong. That is impossible. So it's either all of us are the problem or they're the problem. And it has to be them, because there is no way we would have gotten all these organizations and leaders to come out one by one. Who else do we need? Then we have a former minister of business who said, this is wrong. Then we had even Granger say that, you know what, there is unease about Mingo's numbers. So these are not things that we have invented. Everyone accepts this. But what has happened is they have been trying desperately to come up with something to say this is not. So you hear words like credibility. Well, credibility does not lie with APNU in any form or shape. Credibility of what they say, they have none. So we need to look at things for what they are. They are trying to find the reason, and they want to say these elections were not credible. But what happens? All that it is for them to do that is to blame GCOM, to blame their supporters, to blame the people, to blame the PPP, to blame the diplomatic corps. They're not taking any blame themselves. For 5 years, they messed around Guyana. What they did was corruption. What they did, people decided we have had enough of that and we will vote for a change. And the people did vote for a change. Now they want to thwart the will of the people. So they will come up with any explanation, any lie, any different view that they can that will conceal their shortcomings.
Sanjeev, having seen the information provided by the Commissioner of Police, and like you said earlier, we don't know if the other lists that were presented by Harman would find their way to the Commissioner and there'll be a response. But this has to do now with an issue of jurisdiction. And you're a lawyer, you would know more about this than us. The role of GCOM in the conduct of an elections, and based on all the readings and all the information that is out there, all of this that are happening in terms of GCOM attempting their own investigations and so forth, based on how I understand it, they're in no position to pronounce on this. They're supposed to conduct the elections, they're doing a recount, do the tabulation and declare. And this information and these allegations are to be channeled through the courts. Also, while responding to that, the other issue is, how do GCOM prove that someone voted in the place of another person? And if we can look at the letter from the Mr. Bino, who wrote the GCOM chair, requesting information on who voted for him.
Well, this is the thing. This is the problem. You see, if we could briefly just deal with Bino first. If every citizen on that list were to write GCOM and say, I would like to know whether someone voted for me, or why only the people who didn't vote right? Why don't you and I write and say, I would like to know if you have a record that I have voted? Is GCOM going to respond to all of the people on the voters list? You understand how ridiculous that will turn into. Now, they will want to argue that, oh, that man deserves his answer. But we live in a country, we live in a society. Does that one man elevate his interest above and beyond all other citizens? So we must essentially stop what we're doing and find an answer for Mr. Bino. Is that what he's saying? I understand his concerns. And I have my own views about why he wrote the letter and who persuaded him to write such a letter.
But is it even possible, Sanjeev, for you to prove that?
Well, that is the other side of the coin. Now you're asking GCOM to prove a situation which they're ill-equipped to do. Because what they will do is they will have to refer to their documents and lists. Now, those lists that they will have to refer to, they're not ironclad, but they are accurate. But are you going to stop what we're doing for you to determine whether he voted or he didn't vote? And what happens if you write and say, I want to have proof if I voted or didn't vote? And I write and say, I want to have proof if you voted or didn't vote. This is not the function of GCOM. GCOM can't be. Can you imagine what would happen in other democracies like India and the United States, where they have hundreds of millions of voters and you have to respond to each one if they did or they didn't? That would be preposterous, utterly preposterous. But we get to the other system, the other side of the coin, where what is the role and function of GCOM? GCOM's job is to administer an election. GCOM's job is not to investigate people. GCOM's job is not to take on what a political party comes without foundation and adopt it as its own and ride with it, as we say, and try to get to the bottom of it. That wouldn't happen. GCOM's job is to look at those ballots, to count those ballots again, because Mr. Mingo clearly did a disservice to the nation. That was fraudulent what he did. They now have to open those boxes and count those ballots one at a time. And when they count those ballots one at a time, then they have to say, this is what we find. Anything else, anything beyond that must go. There is no other way to do this. Anything else, they must go to the court. The court is equipped to hear every complaint, and they must prove their case. What we are being buried by now, or what they are attempting to bury us, is with innuendo, half-truth, and plain out lies. And they're hoping that a combination of this will drive the Guyanese people to a revolt. So they are trying to incite them by saying as much nonsense as they can. But the reality is different. Go to the Artichoke Convention Center and let them see. This is why they should have video, so they can see the faces of these people who want to stand there and call out numbers. So they can ask them when they see them, why did you call out my name? You don't know me. Why would you call out my name? They called my colleague Devendra Kissoon. Now, Devendra Kissoon worked as an observer on election day. He was an observer that went to polling stations. When there were the cases in court, Devendra Kissoon walked up those steps, went to court. If you listened to the cases as they went on in the nation, you heard Devendra Kissoon speaking. You heard him speaking when the lockdown had been in effect and he was in Guyana appearing before the judges. How did he get back here? Nobody's been allowed in since the lockdown. So how did he come here? And you saw the name and you objected. But there's one other thing I wish to make about the name. You notice all the names have a particular inference attached to them. The names appear to be people who are likely to, who they believe, APNU believe, are likely to support the PPP. And that is why you're seeing that they're making suggestions of various names and it's being called out. But all these names that they're doing are specifically, so they are racial profiling, which for a government to undertake in such a systematic way is the most reprehensible part of what's going on. They are racially profiling persons based on the list. Now, that is born out of desperation. Surely, they can't expect that that would be a sensible ploy. But they are desperate. We are probably 4 days away from completion here. And within 4 days, the whole nation will know that when we said, the PPPC said they had won the election by 16,000, 17,000, around there, that many votes. When they said so, they were telling the truth. We were telling the truth. Everybody knew that. And we will be vindicated. You will see that it will be so.
You raised the issue of desperation, Sanjeev, and before we wrap up, maybe I give you a minute or two to address this. We saw a statement last night from the coalition, which is clearly another act of desperation. Having claimed victory repeatedly after March 2nd, And as recent as a few days ago, Mr. Harmon talking about going back to Mr. Mingo's declarations to swear in a president. We are now seeing the statement last night somehow is trying to say that the elections were fraudulent and, calling for the elections to be nullified. Your thoughts?
That's utter nonsense. It's not even worth publication by the media. I mean, it is embarrassing. It is utterly embarrassing that we would have a principal political party. There are two main parties in this country, we know that. They are one of those two. They are going to go to a nation, their followers, their supporters, and say we must do this again. Guyana deserves more than that. We cannot put Guyana through that, whether it is their supporters or our supporters. Our nation deserves better than that. They have to be grown up and mature children. This is not where you want, when you're small, you play cricket and you don't get what you want, you get out and you take your bat and ball and you go home. You can't do this. You need to grow up. You need to be more mature. You need to behave like the leaders that the people, your supporters, believe you are. You need to say, look, we didn't do it this time. And look within yourself as to why you didn't do it. Look to your supporters and say, well, we will be back again. God forbid that they are to adopt an attitude that we must nullify the election. They have this is what they have done. They have invented this thing about migrant voters and dead voters. They have no proof of it. They have then repeated it so often, they believe it to be a fact. So they're drinking their own Kool-Aid now. And then in support of coming to the conclusion that we must nullify the election, they rely on their own nonsensical rhetoric. So this is the equivalent of this, Ed, that you would go into a court, for example, and say there is proof I am innocent. And the judge says, well, what is the proof? You will say, yesterday, the day before yesterday, the day before that, the day before that, and the day before that, I said I was innocent. And that is evidence that I am innocent here. That is effectively what you're doing. So APNU has gone every day. This is not credible. This is not credible. This is not credible. This is not credible. And then they rely on the fact that every day before they have said that it is not credible as the basis for why they must say that the elections should be nullified. That's preposterous. In law, that's a self-serving statement. They're not allowed to rely, you're not allowed to rely on your own previous statement. Because obviously, what proof is it that you said yesterday you were innocent and the day before and the day before and the day before? How could you now come to court and say, well, there are 5 times that I was said to be innocent? The judge says, well, who said it? Said I did. Yesterday, the day before. It would be farcical. So they want to now say that the elections are not credible because of all the nonsense. I mean, I have to try really hard not to use language that we can't use here, but it deserves the expletives that it should have. But it is nonsensical that they have made these ridiculous complaints against citizens of the country and published their details and caused them to be made the subject of people asking them questions and people inquiring, are you dead? Are you out of the country? That is what they've put this nation through. And then they take that utter BS and turn it around and say, well, oh, on the basis of what we have been saying, you should now have the election declared a nullity. That's not in the real world. They need to come back down to earth, the real place, and live in reality. They have lost the election and they must go. The people have voted, they must go, and they should. They need to figure out what to do in 5 years from now.
Sanjeev, I want to thank you very much for joining me this morning to update the nation on what is happening, the developments over the past few hours, the past 24 hours rather, or so, and what is happening at the Ortachung Convention Center to some extent. We will be back here at 1 p.m. with another update Until then, we want to say thanks for joining us. Sanjeev, have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Ed. Just a quick thing I'm seeing being posted on social media by a commissioner that I think everything is now in Region 4. We had indicated that there were 2 to go, so it appears that Region 4 is now full speed ahead. Let's see what happens. All right.
Thanks.
Take good care, Ed.
You too, bro.
May God be with you. Bye.